Tourism is one of the largest industries in the world. Over 120,000 jobs in Chicago are dependent on tourism. Why do you want to come to Chicago over New York, over San Francisco, over LA? And we tell that story of why we should be the place that you spend your dollars on your next vacation or your next business trip.
Chicago, the Windy City, famed for its bold architecture, iconic food scene, and the greatest basketball player ever. But with crime on the top of everyone's mind, how do you get people to come to the city? That's why we sat down with Lynn Osmond, CEO of Chicago's tourism agency.
I love Chicago because you can never get bored here.
Chicago is such a magnificent and elegant city, and I could not be happier to take on this role.
You can go to a new restaurant, a new cultural entity, you can go on the waterfront, you can go into a park. There's just so much to do that you will never finish uncovering the city.
Tell me what Choose Chicago is.
Choose Chicago is the destination marketing organization for the city of Chicago. Every city has a destination marketing organization, and we're responsible for bringing all the visitors to Chicago. In the case of Chicago, that's going to look like about 54 million people this upcoming year. And those people come from leisure, business, and also come from the convention area. We have this phenomenal cultural scene. We also have Restaurant Week. We work with the sports teams to talk about why Chicago is a great destination for sports. Then we also, of course, work on the various aspects of business travel, like why we're a good place to hold your meetings. And those meetings can be something as big as filling McCormick Place, which is the largest convention center in North America at 2.6 million square feet of exhibition space. So anything to do with promoting and bringing the city together. You can see we're at McCormick Place. We actually have a lot of healthcare conventions, which is great because it actually connects also to what we're doing in the city of Chicago because we're a great medical community. So we like where possible to do what we say Connect to Chicago, where we can actually work with our local providers to say, this convention's coming to town, but then also we can connect some of the leadership from Chicago for speakers. We can also connect attendees to the convention so that we're trying to make it seamless, that Chicagoans understand the economic value, but also the intellectual capital that we have here at McCormick Place. You have this, and yet sometimes we will have twice as much floor space as this, because we're only taking this space over for the AUA convention. But we will also take over the other wing, the north wing, the south wing, the west wing. I mean, we are the largest convention center at 2.6 million square feet of exhibition space. So
right.
We move in a small city. I mean, when we have the manufacturing show, just think of how many cities in America are over 100,000. And we move that in 3 weeks.
Right, it's crazy.
And we host over 100,000 people.
When you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Oh, teacher, nurse, you know, the standard girl things.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Like, because you became a CEO. I mean, you just said standard girl things.
You know, I think when you're a young girl, I grew up in Canada, you know, you just didn't know. My parents were blue-collar workers. We didn't know what the opportunities were. I didn't know that I could become a CEO. And it was just, you know, my tenaciousness that I started out as a receptionist at an organization running symphony orchestras. And then I worked my way up through a number of different careers and really just kind of kept on persevering and finding the next opportunity. But I didn't know that when I was a kid.
You said earlier that you started out as a receptionist and you moved from Canada, and now you're the CEO of the main tourism organization for the city of Chicago.
Well,
tell me how this all came about.
It's a very circuitous route. So I started as a musician.
Okay.
And I went to school for a Bachelor of Music degree. I was a clarinet major.
Okay.
And then along the way, I decided that I liked business, and I started taking business courses. So I graduated with a degree in music, but also with arts administration.
Okay.
So my first job that was available to me was a summer job as temping as a receptionist. And it was a job in Toronto at the time and at the Association of Canadian Orchestras. Then fast forward, I was offered a job with the Buffalo Philharmonic. That's my green card.
Okay.
And then
literally, that's your green card.
That's where I got my green card in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And
this is quite a journey.
Yeah. And then, you know, fast forward again. After various routes in the California, from Buffalo to California. I was also recruited by a headhunter to run the Chicago Architecture Center, then the foundation. And, you know, when I looked at that job, I thought, if I can book bums and seats in symphony orchestras, I can do this architecture river cruise.
Yeah.
And after having been in Buffalo, New York, which is such an architectural gem, I knew all about architecture.
Right.
And then fast forward for another career flip, you know, I was on the board of Choose Chicago, and I was running a major attraction, and I built the Architecture Center up to develop the new center and build it along the riverfront. And, you know, finally had 5 boats in the river doing architecture river cruises. So when the board of Choose Chicago turned to me and said, we're looking for a new CEO, would you be interested? Yeah. I thought, I love the city. I've done 25 years at Chicago Architecture Center. I think this might be the right time to do it.
Yeah. How do you promote the city when there are real concerns both from inside and outside the city of being safe?
I think I have to start at the 10,000-foot level, that every city in the United States is struggling with this issue of crime and gun safety. And that is something that when I talk to my peers and other major destinations, we are all fighting that narrative of crime and the perceived challenges of crime. Here in Chicago, as a resident, I've lived here for 27 years. I feel safe when I'm walking the streets, and I know that the other employees at Choose Chicago also do. I think there is a narrative that is challenging, but also we have so many wonderful things that are happening in our city. When we look at our lakefront and our waterfronts, there are people biking the lakefront, there are people walking the streets, people going to restaurants, dining out. People in the city know that we have some issues, but we also feel safe in our day-to-day life. So I think we have to change that narrative and make it so that there is the good things that are happening in the city, the beauty of the city, and really try to make that in balance to the issues that we have in the city too. I'm always positive, and I love this city, and I just think it's been so good to me. And I just took it as an opportunity to sell the city I love. Yeah. And I think that, you know, we all get frustrated because, you know, we become a punching bag for some of the national press with our the crime stats. And yet we know that crime in America and the gun violence is an urban problem. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that it's my job to tell the story of this fabulous city and this wonderful narrative about Chicago as we know it as residents. It's the people who have never been here who like to badmouth us. Once you come here, you understand the beauty of our lakefront, the beauty of our neighborhood, the beauty of our skyscrapers, and I think they become part of the advocacy of why Chicago is so great.
Do you have any hard lessons learned from your time as being a leader?
You know, I think one of the hard lessons I've learned as a leader, to not take it personal. It really is about the business and about, you know, looking at it holistically, that this is about the organizational health in the company. And sometimes because you're CEO, that business decision can reflect on you. And sometimes people target their frustration or their anger at you personally. What I look at with tourism and the role of Choose Chicago, I kind of compare it to the honey bee, you know, that we're pollinating so many of these businesses. There are so many aspects that we touch in the city, and really we're the first step of a visitor's journey to discover Chicago. Choose Chicago, like most of the DMOs, receives a major portion of our funding through state funding. We also get money through the city, which supports our tourism efforts for the cultural institutions. And then we also have money through our partnerships and through our various sponsorship opportunities. When you look at the impact of the convention and visitor industry on the state of Illinois, that's $2.1 billion in tax revenue that is generated by what we do here at Choose Chicago. Conventions are about sharing ideas, about innovation, about bringing together the brightest talent. And that's why I think it's really great that this is happening in Chicago, because it's about sharing those ideas and it's about creating new futures. And Chicago's at the heart of all that.
I'm gonna go to the yes or no's, and then we'll go to the kind of like fire round.
Okay.
Cryptocurrency, is it gonna be involved in your industry in the next 5 years?
I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about it.
Virtual reality.
Yes.
artificial intelligence. Is it
Yes.
involved right now?
It is. Chat GPT, you cannot get away from it. It's a new way to organize your tours.
All right, the powers that be said you are no longer allowed to do anything in tourism. You have to switch jobs completely. Where do you go?
Oh, I'm going to cheat, though, because I've always wanted to be a travel guide.
Who's a leader that you admire that you do not know?
Unfortunately, she's passed, but I was just such a big fan of Madeleine Albright. She did so much for promoting women and equality around the world.
Favorite sports team? Can you name one in Chicago as a person who has to promote the city?
Yeah, you know, I love the Cubs.
There we go. Last meal on earth.
Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. My parents were British.
What is something that you do to de-stress?
Walk my dog. He's part husky and he's part pit, and he's 55 pounds of energy and love.
What book would you recommend?
From Good to Great, I think it's just, it's a Collins book, and it's just really looking at how do you get from being just a good organization to being a great organization and a great leader.
Are you binging anything on Netflix or Hulu or HBO or Apple?
Yeah, Ted Lasso.
I'm giving you the ability to teleport anywhere in the world. Where would you go?
You know, the place that I haven't gone to yet that I really want to go to is Morocco, so I'm going to teleport myself there.
How would you describe your leadership style?
You know, I think the biggest thing that people who have worked with me would say that I am very tenacious and I have lots of perseverance. And I think that you have to be tenacious and stick with a vision of how you can get to where you want to be. So it's really looking at that strategic vision, being opportunistic along the way, and making sure that you take advantage of opportunities presented to you so that you continue to grow the organization.
Do you have advice for someone who, say, just entered the role of CEO?
I think the first thing is you have to have where you want to be. You have to set out. It's hard to get there if you don't know where you want to be in the end. So what's your roadmap? What's your big-term vision? Because if you have a big vision, it's easy for people to follow. So it's really being strategic on where you want to go, how you need to get there, and building your plan around that.
Well, I don't want to hold you for too much longer, but really appreciate you.
No, I appreciate this opportunity.
I'm also, I'm a lover of our city. So I very passionate about also making sure that what's being promoted and projected about our city is positive and it's showcasing the good things, all the great things that it has to offer. So I appreciate what you do in that sense too. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
This
thanks for your
has been
time.
really a joy. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. Cool.